Hey, Rob here for Quadratec.com. Today we're going to be showing you how to install a Griffin aluminum exact fit replacement radiator available for the 87 to 06 Jeep Wrangler YJ and TJ. Now the installation steps for both model Wranglers are almost identical, and our install in our 2003 Wrangler here should allow you to follow along effortlessly and get your new radiator installed into your Jeep in just a short amount of time. Now you are going to need just a few tools to get this job done. You're going to need a socket wrench as well as both shallow and deep well 10mm and 11mm sockets, a deep well 17mm socket. A variety of different length socket wrench extensions will come in handy, as well as a swivel for those extensions. You'll need a 9/16 wrench as well as a 10mm wrench, and that if it happens to be a ratcheting wrench, well, that will make your life a whole lot easier. Now, depending on what style hose clamps you have in your Wrangler, you may need a variety of different size nut drivers. I needed a 7mm, an 8mm, and a 1/4 inch nut driver. And then you may also need either a pair of standard pliers or spring style hose clamp pliers. A flathead screwdriver will come in handy. A pair of safety glasses will keep any coolant or ATF from splashing in your eyes. You will need a largemouth funnel to refill that radiator when you're finished the install. And you'll also need some replacement coolant to fill up that new radiator, as well as some distilled water if the coolant you're going to be using is not already pre-mixed. Now, if your Jeep happens to have an automatic transmission, it's also a good idea to have some ATF plus 4 on hand to refill any that's lost when you disconnect your transmission cooling lines. It's also a good idea to have a large drain pan on hand to catch that coolant while you're draining it. Now, why don't we go ahead and show you the steps we took to get this Griffin aluminum exact fit replacement style radiator installed in our Wrangler. So the first thing we got to do is go ahead and place a drain pan underneath of a Wrangler, and then we can crawl under and loosen the drain cock on the bottom of the radiator. And once the coolant starts to flow, then we can move up under the hood and loosen the radiator cap to allow for better drainage. Now that we've given our radiator time to completely drain, we can remove our overflow bottle by simply disconnecting the hose at the cap here and then depressing this little dimple on the bottle and lifting straight up and out. And we can go ahead and dump this with all the rest of our old coolant. Next up, we can go ahead and disconnect our upper radiator hose. Now, if you still have the factory style spring clamp, you can use a pair of pliers to remove those. We've got a worm gear style hose clamp on here, so you can use a flathead screwdriver or a nut driver to go ahead and loosen that. Now, this is also a great time to go ahead and replace your radiator hoses if they're showing any signs of dry rotting, cracking, or bulging. And if you're going to be replacing them, well, we can go ahead and loosen both hose clamps and just simply get this out of the way for now. With our upper radiator hose out of the way, we can move on to disconnecting the lower radiator hose at the radiator, and we're going to come back to that and fully remove it by disconnecting it from the water pump once we've got the radiator out of the way. If your Wrangler has an automatic transmission, the next step we'll need to go ahead and disconnect our automatic transmission lines from the bottom of our radiator. Depending on the year of your Jeep, you may have a simple hose clamp style connection, or you may have a quick connect type fitting. Our Jeep has simple hose clamps, so we can go ahead and remove those and slide off both hoses. Once you pull that automatic transmission line off, it can be helpful to go ahead and stick a bolt or a screw in that line just to keep the fluid from draining out while you're working. With all of our lines disconnected from our radiator, we can now remove those 4 bolts, 2 on the driver's side, 2 on the passenger side, that secure the fan shroud to the radiator. And then we can simply let that fan shroud rest on top of our fan blades, switch to our 10mm socket, and now we can remove the 6 bolts securing the radiator to the core support, 3 down the driver's side and 3 down on the passenger side. Now, before we go ahead and drop our new Griffin aluminum radiator into place, we need to transfer over a few things from our old radiator. Namely, our 2 transmission line fittings need to be swapped over to the new radiator. We're going to use a 17mm socket to take care of that. And then we also need to install a new drain cock into the new radiator as well. Now, while we have the radiator out of the way and we've got some extra space to work, I'm also going to go ahead and remove that old lower hose and install a new one. Then we can go ahead and drop our radiator back into place and get it all bolted back in. With the 6 radiator bolts back in place, we can go ahead and get our fan shroud mounted back to the radiator using those 4 bolts, 2 on the driver's side, 2 on the passenger side, and then we can get all of our hoses reconnected. With all the hoses reconnected to the radiator, at this point we have one final step, and that of course is to refill our system with some fresh coolant. Now, the nice thing about the Griffin exact fit aluminum replacement radiator is that it offers 25% additional coolant capacity all the while maintaining a lighter overall dry weight than an equivalent OE style replacement radiator. And of course, an aluminum radiator is also going to offer better heat transfer capabilities, which translates to better cooling for our engine. Now, there are some procedures that you need to follow to make sure that you properly bleed the system of any air that can get trapped inside when you're refilling a new radiator. And to do that, you're going to want to start up the engine and allow it to come up to operating temperature once you've topped off the radiator with coolant. Now, you're going to start to see some bubbles coming to the surface, either in the radiator filler neck or in your funnel that you're using. And once you start to see those bubbles rise to the surface, it's going to mean that your thermostat is opened up. Once those bubbles stop, well, that'll let you know that you've properly bled the system of any air. Now, while your engine is at operating temperature, it's also a great time to make sure that you go ahead and check your automatic transmission fluid level. Of course, when we disconnected those lines from the old radiator, we lost a little bit of fluid there, so you're going to want to make sure that you top off your ATF as well. And then finally, you want to make sure that you don't forget to fill up your coolant overflow bottle as well. And then you're going to want to keep an eye on that for your first couple drives after your installation of your new radiator. As the engine goes through heating and cooling cycles, it's going to draw a little bit of coolant out of that bottle, and you want to make sure that you maintain the full level. Now, speaking of the coolant that we're going to be using, we are going to be replacing our coolant with Mopar coolant, which is not pre-mixed. So that means we're also going to need to add equal amounts of distilled water to that mixture until we fill up our system completely. Now, if you guys want to get more information or purchase a Griffin exact fit aluminum replacement radiator for your 87 to 06 Jeep Wrangler YJ or TJ, you can click that info button to head over to Quadratec.com. Of course, if you have any comments or questions about the installation, well, you can leave those for us below or contact us at any of the options on the screen. And you'll definitely want to hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch all of our latest product install videos and much, much more. Till next time, I'm Rob. I'll see you guys out on the trail. Right now, we got to get this radiator filled up. We're going to be showing you how to install a Griffin. Whoa!